Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Film Buds podcast. This is our 43rd bonus show, and my name's Henry. This is also officially the 6th part in the World War II cinema series that I'm doing on the show. We've covered the European theater, the Pacific theater, fantasy films, Netflix's The Liberator, the miniseries, Band of Brothers, the Pacific. So check out all of those if you've not already. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are a subscriber on Bandcamp, thank you very much. Or if you've just donated, thank you. We hope you will continue to do so. And make sure to check out our regular podcast available wherever you listen to shows, to podcasts. So please rate, subscribe everywhere you can for Film Buds. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen. Appreciate it. So this time around, I'm going to be talking specifically about Steven Spielberg's World War II films, the 4 films that he has done. So we're going to be starting off with 1941, then Empire of the Sun, Schindler's List, and then Saving Private Ryan. And he also has done a World War I film, War Horse, but I'm going to be saving that for a World War I show specifically. So we're going to be doing the 4 big ones that he's done. And so yeah, it should be a great time. So I think one of the first World War II films that I saw was Saving Private Ryan, which is still one of my favorites to this day, and we'll get to that. Steven Spielberg, obviously, he's my favorite director of all time. He's can really do any kind of movie, everything from a war movie to a musical to sci-fi, comedy, everything. So the guy can do it all, considering, and that's why, obviously, one of the reasons why he's so beloved. But his World War II movies, especially Schindler's List and then Saving Private Ryan, are really on almost every best movies of all time list. I always see them there, and at least for World War II, but really of all time, I see them listed everywhere to no surprise. So we'll get to those, and then we'll get to Empire of the Sun in 1941, which I feel like at least these days are maybe a little lesser known, not as widely seen by newer audiences. But any World War II history story I'm interested in, and with cinema, I love World War II cinema. Obviously, I'm basically covering all of World War II cinema. I'm hoping you're getting something out of it as well. Let's go ahead and get into it. We got some good movies to dive into. Let's start off with 1941. This one came out in 1979, directed by Steven Spielberg, obviously. Stars John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, Treat Williams, Nancy Allen, Lorraine Gary, Ned Beatty, Murray Hamilton, Christopher Lee. That's about it. Co-written by Robert Zemeckis. And the synopsis is: hysterical Californians prepare for Japanese invasion in the days after Pearl Harbor. This one made $94 million against the budget of $35, which the big thing with this movie is Spielberg had done Jaws and Close Encounters, both of which were hits, especially Jaws. And people were, what's he going to do next? Is he going to just keep killing it at the box office? And this one, in the big scheme of things, did flop. But, I was reading, and technically, yes, it is a lesser profit than his previous films, but still a decent success, made 3 times the budget. So not a tsunami there, but, a fairly decent success. But I think the big thing was that got Spielberg was the reviews were fairly mixed, if not even poor. So financially not a hit. And then this was really his first film that was harshly criticized by, many critics and audiences as well. People were pretty let down by it. And this was one of the last Spielberg movies that I saw. I think, and it just goes to show you, even though I had seen so many of his movies, I didn't hear about this one for quite a while. I was like, oh, he made another movie around that time. I had no idea. And I think that just speaks to not many people know about it. Not a lot. I don't think there's a lot of huge defenders of it. It's a fun movie, but it's definitely one that is, I think Spielberg tries to not mention too often. And then it's rare that I see that as a favorite of Spielberg's with audience members, So this one is coming after Close Encounters and Jaws, which were both fairly serious, sci-fi and then a horror film. This one is very much a slapstick, goofy, gag-heavy guys. So very different from his previous films, and really going all out in terms of that classic slapstick comedy. And, I hate to say it, I do agree for the most part with the majority here. It's an okay movie. It's an interesting little part of his filmography. It definitely will never be a favorite. seen it 2 or 3 times now, and I feel like I just, it does the job. There are definitely moments. John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd are awesome in it, of course, as they are in really everything. But there's just too much jam-packed into this movie that just feels very unimportant, non-essential. Like, there are just so many gags, so many dance numbers, and these fist fights, things like that just go on. And then they have to intercut all these different stories, all these different sequences for not much payoff, so it just feels like there's a loss of story and focus and meaning in a lot of these movies, or in this movie, and it's almost 2 hours, so for what it is, it feels too long. I like the concept of this like LA-based action movie during World War II and the parodies of the military and things like that. That's fun, and Spielberg clearly has a love of World War II history and of aviation, and so that comes through. That feels genuine, but there's just too much fluff in the movie, and I think the one that will always be my favorite scene, and it is an iconic moment of Spielberg, even though it's in a movie that's just so-so, is the scene where the military officers giving the speech at that flight line, I believe it is, and he's talking about how there won't be any bombs going off in LA, or, there won't be an attack, and then there's a bomb rolling towards them behind, and the audience, it's just that classic Spielberg visual comedy that, as he's talking about not having bombs go off, there's a bomb literally rolling towards them and about to blow up, and there's the audience watching that happen, so that gets me every single time. It's awesome. By far my favorite moment of the movie. And I feel like that's one that is generally brought up when discussing the movie. I feel like whenever I see a clip of 1941, it's almost always that one. Again, it's worth watching. If you are a fan of Spielberg's, hey, check it out. I don't think it's going to be, the opinion is not really going to change. I don't think as years go by, I don't think it really has sense. Everybody has to have a dud. The thing is, it's not even really a dud. Like, it's still a fun, charming, wacky movie. It's just that there's a little too much. It's a little too bloated, a little too shallow, and then maybe a little just too noisy, if that makes sense. Just gets tiresome sometimes, and then you feel like there are certain characters, certain moments that are forgotten about, or they get lost in the shuffle. So all that stuff it's okay. There are points where I'm a little bored, but it's never that bad. I just feel like it could have been trimmed down to maybe 90 minutes and could have been, tightened up, focused more. The comedy timing is a little off. Spielberg has good comedic timing in a lot of things, but I think in this, maybe something happened and just was not really working for him. Average movie, won't ever love it, I don't think, but still an interesting little part of Spielberg's early filmography, and also just within the World War II cinema subgenre. So that one would be a light 3.5 for that one. So still a fun, solid movie, just flawed. All right, well, let's get to Empire of the Sun. This one came out in 1987, with obviously Steven Spielberg at the helm. It stars a very young Christian Bale, as well as John Malkovich, Miranda Richardson, Nigel Havers, John Pantoliano, Leslie Phillips, Emily Richard, Peter Gale. And the synopsis is: a young English boy struggles to survive under Japanese occupation of China during World War II. This one made $66 million against a budget of $25, so similar to 1941. I don't know why people say 1941 was such a flop when even this was around the same budget and even less money. So this one, although was much more widely acclaimed, and it got many Academy Award nominations, and I feel like it's definitely one of 80s war films, of World War II movies. This is one that is frequently brought up, and this is also one similar to 1941 that I saw pretty late into my viewing of Spielberg's filmography. I also didn't realize, maybe many did, I did not realize Christian Bale was acting so young, or started out so young. I think the first thing I saw him in was maybe American Psycho or the Batman Begins, but I did not realize he started so young, and this is probably one of the best child performances, especially lead performances, that I've ever seen. He is incredible in it, and it's no wonder that he's gone on to have an amazing career afterwards, because even if he had just given this role and quit, like, it would have been a legendary performance, in my opinion, because there is such weight and heaviness to this role in terms of emotional range, and for a young kid, It's pretty amazing. Like, I couldn't imagine doing that when I was that young. The movie starts out with him in China, his family, him getting separated from his parents during this evacuation and when the Japanese are coming in. He's literally lost in the shuffle. There's this huge stampede of people and he gets separated from his parents, and then he basically just has to fend for himself and experience the war as a child, just trying to understand why this is happening, sees the horrors of it. And it's one of those movies that it is slow to a certain degree, and it's not like crazy exciting or these big set pieces or anything like that. But I feel like by the end, when it ends, I can't help but reflect on it. I'm like, wow, that actually was really, really meaningful. It's not a perfect movie in my opinion. There are times where I think the pacing and the tone falters some and is inconsistent, but it is one of those movies that even if it's not perfect, it's one that you cannot help but reflect on, I feel like. And especially that final third act, or the final moment where he finds his parents, but he doesn't recognize them at first, because earlier in the movie, he's like, through all of the chaos and all of the violence and horror and cruelty that he's seen, he's like, I forget what my parents look like, which is such a heartbreaking thing. And I love one great, Spielberg is great at visual storytelling, obviously, which it's film, but he is a master at that, where he's trying to piece together what happened to his parents through this like powder on the floor and like with footprints and handprints, and trying to figure out, all right, where did they go? Who took them? Or, did somebody take them? All that is just brilliant Spielberg. And even though he was still in the fairly early stages of his career, just amazing. And it's stuff that most directors can't top, something like that. And so the movie, it won't grab you with something like, Saving Private Ryan does, but it is very meaningful. It's worth seeing for Christian Bale alone, because as a child, he's amazing in it. Like, every time I watch, I'm like, geez, like, I could not imagine that level of performance with the amount of, the extras, the sets, the action, all that stuff that Spielberg threw at him, and he's just able to like give the performance of the decade, especially for kid actors. John Williams' score is very good, as really always is with Spielberg. Looks very good. Spielberg obviously has a love of aviation and World War II aviation. That's something, and through all of his movies, that I feel like he just seems to have extreme appreciation and love for, and that is apparent in this, especially towards the end in that final sequence. I do love the scene where Christian Bale is looking at all of it's like a refugee camp, and he's looking at all of the pieces of furniture and belongings that were taken by the Japanese, and he's just piecing together who people were, and like people are just trying to find their family members and friends, and some people are lost and others may have died, and then he does eventually reunite with them, although, as I said earlier, he doesn't recognize them at first because he had forgotten, because through all the trauma and confusion of his life up until that point when he got separated. And then there's another big moment where Christian Bale's character sees in the very long, far distance, the atomic bomb going off, and just, yep, that happened, and trying to understand that. Then he also sees the American Mustangs flying over, and those are like his heroes, that bravery and freedom. And Spielberg is great with child actors. The performance in E.T. is another big one. And then another war one, which we'll get to in just a minute, is, Schindler's List, where there's that girl, and it just shows the innocence in a time of war, where Liam Neeson is watching that young girl walk through the ghetto, and while all the Jews are being taken, nobody's just noticing her as she walks along. And he's clearly great at directing child actors, and definitely worth watching. Still not one of my all-time favorite World War II movies. It's a pretty essential one, I think, for many reasons, as I've just been discussing. Maybe will go up as time goes by. I don't know. I've seen it 2 times now, I believe, and it's about the same each time. So heavy 4 out of 5. Definitely check it out if you have not yet. Whether you like period movies, historical movies, war movies, or if you just want a thought-provoking film, or if you like Christian Bale, check it out. All right, 2 more to go here. Let's get to Schindler's List, which came out in 1993. Directed by Steven Spielberg, stars Liam Neeson, Ray Fiennes, Ben Kingsley, Caroline Goodall, Jonathan Segal, Embeth Daviditz. That's about it. Sorry if I'm forgetting anyone. And the synopsis is: in German-occupied Poland during World War II, industrialist Oskar Schindler gradually becomes concerned for his Jewish workforce after witnessing their persecution by the Nazis. So this one made $322 million against a budget of 22, which is pretty crazy to think about considering, not many Holocaust movies make a lot of money. Typically it's just a tiny budget, not much audience because most people just don't want to deal with that, I guess. But it's pretty crazy to think how much money this made. And also not only that, but Spielberg had Jurassic Park come out the same year. So like two of the biggest movies in terms of critical acclaim of all time and influential movies of all time came out in the same year. So it's crazy to think he had both of those movies come out in such a short period of time. I saw this one probably a few years after I saw Saving Private Ryan. I was just like, gotta be ready for this. And I think it was just when I was getting introduced to Holocaust history and World War II history. It is, to me, still the defining Holocaust film. There's not really one that can top it. But it is about 3 hours long, just over 3 hours long. But it is one of the only, and it's in black and white, but it is one of the only black and white 3 hour long movies that does not feel 3 hours. Like the direction, the script is amazing. Liam Neeson and Ralph Fiennes are both incredible in it. Like it's just everyone at the top of their game. Obviously, they understood the weight of the story. It's a true story. It's not one that you just want to throw on, considering it's just having to witness the Holocaust essentially getting in motion and Jews being put in the ghetto and then being taken away and taken to concentration camps, and Liam Neeson being this observer of everything and then obviously being able to save some, and that's why he was considered to be a hero for many reasons. And Ralph Fiennes is the Nazi who's just this unlikable, miserable person. And I think what's interesting in this, I believe I learned about this while I was watching the HBO Spielberg documentary. One way that they described Ralph Fiennes' character is the way he's portrayed, which is interesting, is that he almost seems like he's just doing a job. He's not like, I hate these people. These people are terrible. He's basically like, all right, you're hired to do this, do it. Cause he's sick in the movie. Like he has a cold. He's just feels awful, but he's just having to do this inhumane, horrible thing. Not to excuse him in any way, because he's still obviously doing it and he still is not stopping it. But it's interesting to hear that point of view where it's like, yeah, he's not this, what you'd expect to be a traditional Nazi. He's just like doing the job, which is just an odd but interesting concept to think about in the movie. And a big point in the film is as I mentioned earlier, is the young girl in the red coat, who Liam Neeson sees walking through the ghetto as people are being rounded up and no one is noticing her. She's just a young, innocent blonde girl. And that's the only bit of color in the movie is her red coat. And then what's tragic is you see when they're putting bodies in these mass graves, is you see Liam Neeson sees her body in there and it's just identified by that red coat. And it just shows corner of or just a tiny moment of the horrors of the Holocaust and how there was just no mercy and no governments were just not doing anything to stop it. People didn't care. It was just this went on and on and on, obviously. And that's a big thing. It's just young girls, young boys were just rounded up as well, along with everybody else. But really, every moment in this movie is either emotional, thought-provoking, beautifully shot. I mean, it is a great-looking movie. It was shot more in handheld than what is typical with Spielberg, but that makes more sense considering you're basically meant to be like an observer to all of this, just as Liam Neeson is in some ways. Another big moment is when you see a group of Jewish prisoners being taken into one of the camps, and you see what you think is snow, but it's actually ashes from the ovens where the bodies were burned, and God knows what else was going on. But that's a interesting little Spielberg flair, and there's a million of those. Bottom line, I don't think there's ever going to be a Holocaust movie that will top this in terms of scale, production, weight, performance, commentary. Like I don't. There are some really good ones that have come out since, but I just don't think one will top this. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, hey, I'd love to be proven wrong, but I don't think this one will always be the defining Holocaust movie, in my opinion, at least for a long, long time. And it's rightfully deserving of being so. John Williams' score is excellent. Janusz Kaminski's cinematography is great. Liam Neeson, the lighting in this movie is amazing. And it shows what the different demons, as it were, that Liam Neeson is dealing with, and that how his face is lit and shaded and all that is amazing. And it just speaks to another layer of the movie that you can discover and think about on rewatches. I've seen it probably 3 times at this point, and there's always something new that I notice or think about. And so, yeah, I couldn't say enough about it. One of Spielberg's all-time best, one of the best films of all time to me. And if you have not seen it, you got to see it. Even if it's a very tough watch, you got to see it. So that one is a heavy 5 out of 5. Heavy 5. All right, well, let's get to the last movie for the show, which is Saving Private Ryan. This one came out in 1998. The 90s were a pretty good time for Spielberg to me. Directed by him, of course, stars Tom Hanks, Matt Damon, Tom Sizemore, Edward Burns, Barry Pepper, Adam Goldberg, Vin Diesel, Giovanni Ribisi, Ted Danson, Jeremy Davies, Paul Giamatti, Dennis Farina, Max Martini, and a few others, but a pretty great cast. And the synopsis is: following the Normandy landings, a group of U.S. soldiers go behind enemy lines to retrieve a paratrooper whose brothers have been killed in action. So this made $482 million against a budget of around 70. So another unexpected, I mean, maybe not unexpected considering it's Spielberg, but it's a big epic World War II movie, but it made a huge amount of money. And so that just speaks to Spielberg's draw a lot of the time, because that's typically not the case with movies like this, and was the case with Schindler's List. And it won many Golden Globe and Academy Awards, as well as many others. It was praised highly by World War II veterans for its accuracy and depiction of D-Day and combat. I saw this, I think, as I was saying earlier, I saw this was in the early stages of me getting interested in World War II history. Definitely one of the first ones that I saw. And I think, like basically everybody else, it really just hits you like a rock. That opening scene on the Omaha beach is just unbelievable. There's no other sequence like it, where the doors open and these soldiers are just mowed down. Some of them drown. Some of them are just left there to die because of the chaos of the invasion. And it's just the most unbelievable, horrific, intense, just mind-boggling sequence, probably, or one of the most I've ever seen in film. And I think is how this movie starts, is just unlike anything else. One thing with this movie, this is one of my favorite films of all time, would probably be in my top 5 of all time. My favorite Spielberg for sure. One thing that I've heard about this movie in comparison to others is that some people say, oh, you only like it because, or it's only considered to be this amazing movie because of the first 20 minutes, which is the Omaha Beach invasion or touchdown. And I disagree with that completely. I think the rest of the movie, it's about 3 hours long. The rest of the movie is amazing. I think every action sequence is so unnerving and intense, and it feels as grounded as I feel like it could be for a war film. It's a lot more handheld cinematography, just as it was with Schindler's List. Tom Hanks this is my favorite performances of his. An interesting role for Vin Diesel, for Matt Damon. My favorite scene, one of my favorite scenes of all time in cinema history, maybe my all-time favorite, but if not my favorite, at least one of the top 3, top 5, is the speech that Giovanni Ribisi gives in the church about when he was a kid and pretending to be asleep when his mother came back from work. I think that performance, that direction, that writing I'm like completely, I don't even know the exact reason for it. I'm just completely blown away and mesmerized by that scene every time I watch it. It's just a perfect moment in cinema. And so that scene alone is enough for me to praise the movie, but that scene is incredible. Really, every conversation that Tom Hanks has about his past with the members on his team and them trying to get to know him and you getting to know all the other people, it's so compelling and emotional. The sequence where they attack that machine gun nest where Upham, the young innocent like typist, is having to watch the entire sequence through a sniper scope is awesome. And that came from, they weren't able to get the right lighting and the right shot, and so they had to come up with something else, but that actually turned out to be an amazing idea, to watch this whole sequence through a sniper scope. That is amazing. The final attack where they do find Private Ryan, and they're just trying to defend that city with just makeshift bombs and explosives, and it's almost like all that stuff it's just so intense and so tragic, because you see really almost all of them die, and when each person dies, it's so grim and in your face and unique. As weird as that sounds, it's just it makes a point of really having each death be very, very memorable, because obviously the movie's about a group of guys going to save one person so he can get back safely, but in turn they pretty much all die, and so there's that commentary there of one person versus a group trying to save him. And then Private Ryan, he lost 3 brothers on D-Day. And so then does he deserve to get to go home while others have to stay? Just all of those ideas are amazing. And then also with Tom Hanks, you learn all he was a teacher back home. He's this amazing leader in combat, and then he's just like a teacher. Everyone is shocked that's just, he lived a completely normal life before this, and he's this incredible war hero. It's a movie that, similar to Schindler's List, you don't want to just throw on. It's so gruesome and sad and emotionally draining, but it is worth watching. Even if you hate war movies, it's essential watch, I think, even just for a depiction of World War II and of D-Day. I don't think you'll ever get better than that. Great score by John Williams. Looks incredible. The sequence where there's a sniper, the enemy sniper, where Barry Pepper, who is such an underrated actor, in my opinion, also was in Flags of Our Fathers, such an underrated actor. I love him in everything. He shoots the sniper through his scope. Great moment. Very cinematic. And that's also where Vin Diesel gets shot. And there's that point where they're trying to get to him, but they can't. Just all of it is just so, I don't want to get too repetitive, just so unique. And each scene feels very creative and fresh in terms of what's being discussed. The look, the action, all of it is just top-notch Spielberg. And I don't know if there will ever be a Spielberg movie that will top this for me. I think this will always be my favorite, which with Schindler's List being a close one to the top. But will always be my favorite, always has been. One of the best of all films of all time, in my opinion, is I think it's widely considered to be very deserving of being so. I feel like I could talk for hours about this movie, but it's just a landmark movie to me. So heavy 5 out of 5, a favorite, all-time favorite. Yeah, you got to see it if you haven't yet. All right, well, that is about it, I think. Again, if you've not checked out my other World War II cinema episodes, please check that out. There will be many more in the months to come as well. So trying to cover all of World War II cinema as much as I can, and I'm really glad I was able to get this one in. Please check out the regular show if you have not yet. Subscribe to Bandcamp and get all of our previous bonus shows if you haven't already, and all that just goes to help support the show, and you get a lot of great content. Follow us on social media at FilmBuds. All that great stuff. Comment, let us know what you want to see, don't want to see. Follow us on Letterboxd. Hope you enjoyed it even half as much as I did, and I'll see you next time.